Colbert Report, Steve Wozniak. How are you?
Hey, nice to be here. I try to be entertaining and make jokes with my friends all the time, but they see somebody like you who's so good at it. I'm just envious.
Dude, I have writers. I can't do that. Me, I can't even. I call my writers and say, I need to order pizza. Can you help me through this? And they say, just pepperoni. I like pepperoni. That's how it works. Okay, invented the personal computer, co-founder of Apple. For people who don't know your story or haven't had a chance to get the book yet, let's go back to that time. How did you, what are you doing? You're going to, hey, I have an idea. Let's take computers and bring them home.
Well, my whole life had a lot of electronics direction and real incredible skills that were all coming in just by chance, partly by design, just to make that little product in that year. Once the parts got to the right price, we were going to have personal computers, and it was finding a formula. It was very different than computers before, making it look like a typewriter and not like some big piece of equipment that should go in the network rack.
And did you have any sense of what you were doing and what it was going to mean?
We had a computer club, and this was the focus of my life. We talked about social ramifications when people had these tools.
What year was this? What year was this?
This was 1975.
Okay, 75.
Homebrew Computer Club, and we were talking about how the person who knew how to program and solve some problems at work was going to be more important than the CEO. He was going to be able to get more done than the big, huge, multi-million-dollar computers the company had and didn't know how to manage, and we really believed in this stuff. This drove us. I felt like I was using my skills as a designer to help the world get this tool.
And did you know, though, that it was going to, like, in the garage and working on it with Jobs and Apple, did you, because this is before people had PCs in their homes.
It would be like today. No. First of all, you can never really see the applications. You can never think of the day that you'll be able to have music on a computer. It started out with a much more infantile computer, closer to what they were like before. And then we have things like killer apps. The first spreadsheet program let a small business person solve real problems in their life. In half a day, they could do more work than they could do in the rest of their life, all the years in the rest of their life, and that's really what made the things go. But when we were in the club, we were thinking, wow, people are going to use these computers the way we do. They're going to write programs to solve their problems. And everybody else stepped in and wrote the programs before them to sell it.
And for a lot of people who and certainly in the early days, looked at a lot of guys designing computers and thought, oh, just a bunch of geeks. Let me just show you this, okay? There's a picture of him and David Lee Roth. Good. From Van Halen.
Well, I want to be thought of as a geek. I didn't want to start a company. I never wanted
Well, that's
any,
the thing, right? Your first
money.
design for the personal computer you gave away?
Yes, I actually passed out all of my circuits and all of my code and everything at the Homebrew Computer Club and said, here, build your own. You can build this little device with a bunch of chips that can actually run a computer language.
So if you didn't want to start a company, how did Apple come to be in the way we know it?
Well, first of all, Steve said, let's start a company to sell a PC board. It's a part of a computer. For $40, we'll sell the PC board, and that'll help people make them easier. And then a local company, the one computer company in our store, computer store in our whole area, said, hey, we want to build these things all built. People don't want to spend the time building them. They want to come in the store and buy it like a hi-fi, take it home, plug it in, and it works. And we didn't really achieve that fully till our Apple II computer later. And that was the one we figured would be a big winner.
I mean, it's funny, when Apple announced the release of the iPhone just last week, the companies release new technology all the time, and you go, hey, that's cool. This was on the front cover of the New York Times, like every newspaper, and you never see that. Apple's not buying the time, buying the space. It's become this thing. This crazy
Apple's
brand.
really good at interesting products. I was actually crying at the keynote that somebody finally built a phone that kind of works like my computer. The way I really want the internet on my phone. It's got a lot of problems, and that bothers me. It's got a lot of limitations. Things like, that's like quantity. They get fixed over time. It's quality of the device. The first Macintosh computer could do very little, and it cost a lot, but it had a different style, a different approach to computing. Every computer today is now a Macintosh. So it's that ability to see the future and get there ahead of everyone else, even when they're sort of denying it in today's terms of what they expect.
It's different, too, because, in the certain communities, the Mac was the kind of computer you took home, but for most people, Apple wasn't really that big a deal until the iPod came out, and the iPod sort of exploded in a way, because more people still have your PCs rather than Macs in their homes. But the iPod and what has come since?
But
they don't sell as many computers as the PCs do.
But they set the trends of what the next step in computers, and everyone else follows. Even Microsoft will follow in the operating system what Apple has done ahead of time, and we've just constantly been out there as the leader.
And I guess the idea is that there's a philosophy behind the company, which is it goes above and beyond making money. Is that still accurate?
First of all, every product has got to just grab you and say, I have to have that. So looks and style is very important to us. And also, we've got to, try to use the state-of-the-art technology and do things a little different way. We don't want to just do the same approach and better. We want to do something sort of a whole different approach. Kind of puts us on our own, more independent.
All right.
I mean, the iPod was called a music device, but if you looked at every music device in the world that existed, it was the first one that wasn't a music device. It was a little satellite to your computer.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move business aside. You're a prankster. Did you crank call the Vatican?
I did in college, yeah.
Yeah, you did?
Yeah,
Right,
but I do pranks every day.
This is going up because you said you didn't want to start a company, and you're not really the guy that, like, hey, let's make as much money as we can off of this business. How did you crank call the Vatican? What'd you do?
Crank call the Vatican. This was back in college, and we had this little device called the Blue Box. Steve Jobs and I actually sold them. I built them, and then he said, let's sell them.
That's always been a relationship, hasn't it?
You know what? It was a short-term thing. And I don't look back on it as really good times, but it sure does remind me, this is what you're like when you're young and in college, and you discover that putting tones into a phone can make all the free calls you want anywhere in the world. So, yeah, I called the Pope once and said I was, I made up an excuse, and I got to talk to the bishop who was going to be the translator.
I heard you who'd you pretend to be, like Henry Kissinger?
I pretended to be Henry. I said I was Henry Kissinger calling on behalf of Richard Nixon at the summit meeting in Moscow. And I didn't use an accent until I finally talked to the bishop. And the bishop said he'd actually just talked to Henry Kissinger. So they called to check it out.
So wait a second, free long distance calling. So you are why everybody's downloading for free. You found a way around it.
It's really funny. I had this personal philosophy that I would pay for my own phone calls and only use the phone box to explore the phone system and its flaws. And I was true to that. But looking back, I helped other people buy them and make their free calls.
Did you give
and I'm not for it.
Did you give Gorbachev and Bush a video game?
I gave them both Game Boys. Absolutely. Game Boy was a great relationship between the West. It was the first time a consumer electronics product had to be marketed by Russia to the West. They didn't know how to work the contracts or anything. And it was really for the game Tetris that came with the Game Boy to the United States. So, of course, I gave one to Bush wrapped in red, white, and blue, and one to Gorbachev wrapped in red. And a week later, Bush was in the hospital, and they had him on TV and in the newspapers in a magazine playing his Game Boy.
And you didn't even design the Game Boy, did you?
No, I didn't.
I wish you did, though.
But I love it. I play it. I still play it.
Did you Tetris?
I played Tetris. I played Tetris one time on a 14-story building, the Science Library at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island.
Wicked,
They had it for weeks. They had it up there where the windows lit up as the pixels. The windows of the building. And the pieces came down across the street. You could play it on a computer.
Amazing. One of the things, before we let you go, you get your book, it's called I Was Out There. You talk about making, your life story, all the things you've done, and also the Apple. And a lot of what you do is you have a philosophy in your business and the way you do it. I wanted to know, Apple's taking it on the chin these days for the digital rights management and copyright. And being a guy who's a part of this, part of the beginning of this and the development of Apple, what do you think about where we're going with respect to that? Because, iTunes has a lot of digital rights management. And
I think that iTunes actually found a formula that works very well and satisfactorily for people, and that the business is doing well. I mean, sure, anybody can get around iTunes that wants to. It's not an extreme digital rights management. There's absolutely no way to crack it. It doesn't really interfere with your life that much. And I think that's what the world needed for a long time. As long as the music's at a right price. We got to get to that future where we're using the electronic wires to send the stuff, but we also have to introduce our kids not to get away with anything you can. Of course, I do speed when I'm on the freeway. It's sort of like that. Maybe I'll give a piece of music that I shouldn't to my son,
right?
Electronically.
Everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation, and I think it's really got a good handle on right now, especially the iTunes Store.
Steve, thanks for coming in, man. We really appreciate that.
Glad to be here.
Steve Wozniak, everybody. That's the name of his book. Never mind just David Lee Roth. There's also a picture of him and Emmylou Harris, who I believe sang at his wedding. So it's clearly brilliant. I Was the name of his new book. Lots more to come on the program tonight, including this.